Well, it's me again. No, but honestly, just wanted to express what a fantastic time that we had in South Africa last August. As you can see from the dates, oh no you can't, so you can put the dates on, but I did on my book. We were there for approximately just under 3 weeks, and I have to say that it was the most amazing experience and exceeded expectations, I think, in every respect. And I hope that you enjoy some of the photographs that I've got for you. First of all, my favourite photograph, I just absolutely love that, and that is actually in the Kruger National Park. I know a lot of people go on safari to see rhinos and lions and leopards and tigers. Well, not tigers on this one, obviously, but I really wanted to see giraffe. I have to say that although I'd seen them at Dudley Zoo, I absolutely couldn't wait to see them in their natural habitat. And we saw a lot of giraffe. And they do appear more than once, I'm sorry to say, but I just thought they were amazing. So we actually flew down, we actually flew from Birmingham via Istanbul down to Johannesburg. And there's Johannesburg. It was a lovely flight, and actually we didn't have jet lag, as you can imagine, because obviously we're sort of just got 1 hour difference. So when we landed at Johannesburg, we hadn't got any jet lag, as I said, and we didn't want to waste a moment. So I've got one slide just to show you our day in Johannesburg before we left. So we spent a little time in Johannesburg, and then we flew from Johannesburg up to Hoedspruit, which is in the Greater Kruger. It says there private reserves, so ours was pretty much where that number 2 is. That's called Shakudu, very traditional. And then after 8 days, well, within a few days, we actually then drove this way and to another reserve here, which is in the Watersburg Biosphere. So a much bigger area, but it was just fantastic. Now, some of you know that I'm not very good with computers. And some weeks ago, I managed to lose absolutely everything off my laptop. Everything. And Tom, at Wombat Computers, is trying his very best to try and recover some of my documents, PowerPoints, photographs, but I lost everything. And I was distraught. I was. And because I'd already transferred them to the laptop. And the only good thing was I do books for my holidays, and I'd actually ordered that the day before I lost everything. Otherwise, that would have been about 3 months' worth of work. So in a panic, I got in touch with a very good friend who was on the trip with us. There were 6 of us on the trip. That was the maximum number of people. So you can see that it was fantastic. And this gentleman here was the one that actually booked the trip first. He's from California. And you can see his camera equipment is fairly advanced. So John and I and the others were taking general shots, you know, the sort of just the lions and the rhinos that were very close. But he was doing all the specialist stuff. And I had to say to him, please can you send the photos back? And he did. So without him, I actually wouldn't have been able to do this, and I'm really grateful to him. So he's a fantastic photographer. So, as I said, we landed at the OR Tambo airport in Johannesburg. That's the largest airport actually in South Africa, named after Oliver Reginald Tambo, who came the predecessor for Nelson Mandela. And we didn't want to waste a moment, so we got the local train to Nelson Mandela Square. And the 4 Americans that were with us said, you're not going on the local train in Johannesburg, are you? And because they wouldn't come with us. But we did, to Sandton, and found Nelson Mandela Square, and it was well worth it because it's absolutely unbelievable. You can see the scale on that photo there. But this is a miniature, and it's in Braille. And I thought that was fantastic. And of course, we've got some of his quotes. I didn't put any other photos in, but the whole area is absolutely stunning. So that was our one day in Johannesburg. And then we met our guide, James, local gentleman, and he was with us for the whole of the time. So we had our own guide, and as I say, just 6 people. And so the day before we flew over to the reserve, we actually went to an elephant sanctuary. And some of the words are hard to be a sport, Dan. And obviously these elephants had been maltreated, and they were quite old, over 20 years old. But we were able to feed them with the protein balls, which was fantastic. So you put them in the trunk and they were eating them. And the ones that they dropped on the floor, they'd hoover up later. But the photo on the right, we took elephants for a walk. And I have to say, I couldn't believe this was our first real day. And I've got elephants walking behind me, and I just like, this was fantastic. I mentioned giraffe, but elephants were like number 2. So, yeah, there we are. And obviously these were very used to humans. So, as you'll see just from this other slide here, I was quite in awe of them. And then our friend took a photo of the eye for me, because, I mean, just the hairs around the eye there. And actually on the tail as well, really, really coarse hair. And he'd pick up his legs so that we could look underneath and to feel the difference, you know, of the skin. And it's just fantastic, as you can see. So that was, I thought, well, if this is day 1, I'm happy already, really. And then we flew to the reserve on what can only be described as a very small aeroplane to Herdsford, which is in the Greater Kruger area. You've got departures and you check in there, and then they put the cases through that hole and there's somebody outside. It's brilliant. And then when you come in, they just pass them back through the hole. But I thought this was interesting, that all the fields are circular, which aids watering, which is quite interesting. So we'd actually now in the sort of Greater Kruger, and the system was that we arrived at lunchtime, so we were able to do our first game drive in the afternoon, which would then go from about 3:30 until after dark, because obviously you wanted to see the nocturnal animals as well. And then each day it would be a 5:30 start, 5:30 a.m, with rusks and coffee. And then we'd go out and then have a really good breakfast when 3 hours later we came back, and then another game drive in the afternoon. So, and I've tried to spread out the photos. So game drive 1, this was our first afternoon. It was Shakudu, very, very traditional, very small reserve. 4 drivers. We had Tyler. He was amazing. His knowledge was absolutely superb. That's our Land Rover. And there we are on our first day. So we'd got, basically, because there were only 6 of us, we all had like a window, if you like. There was no one inside.
You look very vulnerable there.
We look very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there was one photo which made me realise that I was quite vulnerable, yes. But I think the thing is, this was quite good, because these were steps, so we could step up into the vehicle. Obviously, he was in radio control. He did have a rifle as well, but we never had to use anything like that. But and I think that's actually me, sadly. I'm sorry that's spoiling the photo. But it was fantastic. Everything about it was traditional food. We ate in the boma outdoors around the fire every night. But on the first afternoon, there you go, and he was well fed. We reckon he'd had a kill the day before. And we saw the same lion, because Tyler would know that they were the same, more than once. And yeah, he was just coming towards us, and he takes absolutely no notice of the vehicle and just walks past. Yeah, we just stayed still, keep our hands inside. It was phenomenal. And then the lioness. I'm not sure whether that was, one had a cub 3 days later. I'm not sure if it was that one or that's the sister. I'm not able to tell, but They would always be together. There were the one male and the two females. They all sort of roamed together. Now, this is the only time we saw an animal inside fencing. This cheetah had been abandoned, and for its own safety it had to be within. It wasn't actually an enclosure. There were buildings, it was quite a large area, but you'll see why it's behind the fencing in just a moment. It's beautiful, as you can see, but I know it's not so good seeing it behind the fence. We've got the Nile crocodile, we've got the hornbill. There are a lot of hornbills. The yellow-billed hornbill is called the flying banana. That's the red-billed one. And that's the grey go-away bird, because that's what he'd say, go away. So that's a go-away bird. And then we've got an oxpecker on a rhino. Okay, and there were red and yellow-billed oxpeckers doing a very good job taking the parasites off the skin of the animals. And this is the Drakensberg Mountains with sunset. So we had a fantastic first game drive. But we saw lots of other animals, but I haven't put them in because I've put them into the later ones. So, day 2, mom and baby, rhino. And I didn't realise, I only realised recently there's an oxpecker there. So you'll notice that the mom there, the horn's gone, but the baby's still too young to be dehorned. Now, the animals were not worried at all by the Land Rovers. The reason we were told is because when they come to dehorn the rhinos, they actually use helicopters. So helicopters do worry them, the sound of a helicopter, but they are completely at ease with the Land Rovers, which was amazing. And you can get really close to rhinos because, as you know, their eyesight is really dreadful. And they're just hoovering up the grass. And I thought that was pretty good, because it actually just shows the prehensile mouth here. We didn't really get that close to hippos, fortunately. There was a big water hole with a lot of hippos that we saw every day, but we didn't ever see them come out of the water hole. We did wait a couple of times. And then there's one of the kingfishers, that's the brown hooded kingfisher. But we saw a lot of birds. On one game drive, an early morning one, we saw 24 species. But it's worth having such a fantastically talented guide. You know, he was absolutely superb, and he loved what he was doing, and he was quite an exciting driver. So, as you can appreciate, on a small reserve you can't have many elephants because they are so destructive. So there's only a small herd of elephants at Kruger. There's a young male there. And they were pretty much destroying those trees behind. But what was fascinating to me was the next slide. Now, they were by a water hole, but there's a solar-powered pump which pumps fresh water up to go into the water hole. And they don't really fancy having the stagnant water. They'd rather wait for the sun to come up, the pump starts working, and they get the fresh water. And I just thought, well, that's pretty amazing, really. Yeah. So I thought, well, no, we'll have the fresh water. Then, as you can see, it just runs down into the water hole. But we saw there were just 5 elephants on Kruger of various ages. We did see the grandma of the little one. Right, why was the cheetah behind the fence? Well, the area that the orphan cheetah was in also contains some buildings. You could stay, it's like a holiday, a small holiday, sort of not cottage that we'd have in this country, but it was really for about 6 people. So you could stay in that building and then do a walking. We never did a walking game drive with an armed guide. We were always in the Land Rover. But these two here were waiting for the gate to open because they knew that the other cheetah was inside there and they were trying to get at it, basically. So they were sort of, well, we're just going to wait until he comes out. But clearly, he's very well protected. He has to be kept inside. And this was the group of people that were going to actually do the walk, as I say.
Why did they want to get at the other cheetah?
They just, well, I think they wanted to attack it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid. But, so he's kept safe. And I just think, I mean, they're stunning, they're amazing. And I mean, to see them, we drove up, and they were dirt tracks, they weren't tarmac roads, obviously. And these two, they were just there, waiting for that. And as that gate opened, off they went. But obviously, they had no luck. So, that was that morning. And I used to teach A-level biology for many years, and one of the things I used to talk about was endangered species and conservation. And I actually used to teach about the Hertzbert Endangered Species Centre. And I never ever dreamt that I would ever visit it. So when we had the opportunity, we did a game drive, then we had the opportunity to go there, which was an extra. Obviously I couldn't turn that down. So we saw wild dogs, which have got fantastic colouring. That's the only leopard I saw, and he was in an enclosure, I'm afraid. Right at the end, you'll see the only person who saw all the big five is sitting over there. I saw the big four. And then sable antelope, sunbirds. Oh, absolutely, it's tiny. Collared sunbird there. But this is quite amusing. Obviously, this rhino, there were some rhinos that had been adopted, taken into the Endangered Species Centre because they'd been orphaned. But when they were tiny, they were brought up with goats, and the goats followed them everywhere. So you've got the rhino, and you've got the parents, the goats, tagging on behind. So they explained that they just felt that, yeah, the rhino was part of their family. So it was the goat rhino family there. And then we came back, and after lunch, we'd go out again for our afternoon game drive. Cape Buffalo, saw about 130 Cape Buffalo. And that's a lovely little youngster there. That's the same line. He's coming towards, he just sort of walks towards you, have a look, and carries on. But zebra was something else I was particularly interested to see. This is Burchell zebra. It's, as it says there, a subspecies of the plain zebra. But if you look carefully, there are faint, what they call shadow stripes between the black bands. You see those? So that's what would distinguish them as Burchell zebra. And I think the patterning on the face of that one. And when I compared my photos of different ones, you can see quite a difference between them. So that was the afternoon, and then the following day we went to the Kruger, and whereas our game reserve was tiny, this is the size of Belgium, so it does have tarmac roads, and we only did a tiny section of it. But the blue wildebeest, quite stunning creatures really, but one I'm particularly fascinated by was this greater kudu, and the horns on that, the way that they use the horns to actually get the branches and pull them down when they're feeding. I mean, that was a huge male there. It's really stunning. And then ostrich. But it was a fantastic day. We were in a larger vehicle. It belonged to the game reserve that we were on, but it was the rear of a lot of hippos in the distance, as you can see, and the impala, again, absolutely, they're stunning, magnificent animals. Saw a lot of impala. I haven't put all the animals on, as you can guess. So whereas we had Burchell's zebra, that's Burchell's starling, beautiful and blue. It doesn't, the photo there doesn't really do it justice. the yellow-billed hornbill flying banana, they were everywhere. And John's favourite, the lilac-breasted roller. Absolutely stunning. We are quite keen to do some bird watching. Waterbuck, which has very interesting markings, as you can see. We saw a lot of warthogs. They're actually where we were staying. We were just sitting outside by the pool on Saturday, and a family of warthogs just walked past us. And of course, a huge number of elephant on Kruger, because it's such a massive area. We were fairly near to the Mozambique border when we took these photos. And that's the photo I used at the start, because I am very fond of it. And then we're at this lookout. Yeah, that one. Bob Bedjan and Fran's lookout. And that's just the 6 of us with Tyler, our driver. So, yeah. So this was a slightly larger vehicle. It belonged to Shakudu, and Tyler would actually drive it to Kruger for us to use that during the day. So that was higher up off the ground. So that was a day actually in Kruger, but then we went back to the greater Kruger area, and my favourite bird photo has got to be the bateleurs. So this was an early morning one again. You've got immature and adult. So the bateleur eagles are they're very closely related to fish eagles, and the name bateleur refers to, it's French, but it refers to the fact that they are so exquisite when they fly, the actual way that they soar and move. So it sort of means, not a clown, it's more like performer. And I just look, I mean, look at the size of this. I mean, I think it's just fantastic. I know we've missed a bit of the tail feather off there, but it's quite tricky to get photos like that, as you know. And then the white stork as reflection. Now, this was very early, only just after dawn, and Tyler said, well, we'll need to go down to the waterhole, because I think there's something very special that I'd like you to see. And I have to say, they all came down the wildebeest in a very, very, cave buffalo, in a very, very organised way. And they all drank, and some of the older ones were just plodding along behind, but I counted 126. And then they'd had a drink, and then they just carried on. So it was quite remarkable, something that for so early, I think it's worth getting up really early if you can see something like this. Just a few other things. The mongoose, a rather large warthog, he was having a nice snooze near one of the buildings that we were staying in. And that's a Nyala, that's a female Nyala. It's quite difficult sometimes to tell the difference between Steenbok, Nyala and Impala and stuff. Right, so we thought we were going to see a leopard, and they were watching the leopard. So we knew that they knew where the leopard was, so we followed the leopard down. Well, it wasn't even a track, it was more like a dried up water bed, and we hadn't got much Land Rover roof left by the time he'd finished. But he was determined that we'd hopefully see the leopard. John saw the leopard, the other 5 of us didn't see the leopard. And then obviously some more of these Buchel's zebra there. But there's an oxpecker there on his neck. I just think it's the way that he put his head up like that. So we were having a fantastic time, and our last game drive, I know it's quite difficult to see, but that's a 1-day-old lion cub. And obviously it was very difficult to actually focus on it because it was being well protected by its mother, and that's the sister, and that she really eyeballed me. We weren't obviously, we were as close as we could go without being a danger to them, but yeah, she could see it, and I was told, right, you look away now. Don't take a photo. Just looked away. And that was the roof after we'd finished driving us round. And then just a butterfly that was outside our bungalow. So, we then had a drive west to Kango. Oh, actually, I think there's one slide. Oh, that was it. That was what the scenery was like. So we'd actually got lots of local farmers selling their oranges and different fruits and vegetables. Huge number of banana plantations, and very well organised fruit farms. Quite a lot of fruit does come in from South Africa, as you know. And then this bit here, it was quite mountainous, and it was some eucalyptus as well. But it was a very interesting ride, but that wasn't the main point. So, we got to the Kango Game Reserve, so we travelled quite a long way from the Kruger National Park, and we stayed in this Royal Morabisi, much bigger, 41,000 acres, that part, but then part of the Waterberg biosphere. So we've got sable antelope. We stayed out until it was dark, so you can see that photo there. I just put one in, that's Koran. And we saw nightjars, and some of the birds, they're just on the road. You have to just stop so you don't actually drive over them. And then wildebeest and impala there, but a much larger area. But different, but very interesting. Now this gentleman is over 60. And, yeah, 60. Yeah. And he was just destroying that tree. There was actually nothing left of it by the time we finished, but I just thought it was a good close-up to show the way that he was pulling on those, but then he used his tusks to bring the branches and the boughs down, and there was nothing left. But because this was a much larger area, there were more elephant than we could see. A few birds, mainly because we did an early morning drive. My book actually has a lot more. We did 24 species this morning. That's the hoopoo there. A canary, and magpie shrike. I mean, the tail on that is rather fantastic. You can see the magpie colouring. The fish eagle, which is related to the bateleur on the earlier one. Bee-eater, one of my favourites there. I love that shrike, the crimson. And then another bee-eater there, which is a swallow-tailed one. But it was fantastic, just to see so many. We'd left Tyler, had our driver at the Shakudu. We then had Joe, and Joe's speciality with birds. She provided me with a list of Kango species. There was about 10 pages and 20 on each page. And I meant to bring it, but I couldn't find it. Otherwise, I ticked off everything I saw. I had to keep writing lots of notes, as you can imagine. So, right, so, it was quite civilised, this one, because we'd stopped somewhere for morning coffee. But then we had to climb back in to the Land Rover. And they just have that little step, and then you have to try and sort of get up. But ibis there, another kudu, that's obviously the female kudu. You saw the one with the very elaborate horns earlier in the Kruger. And a baby giraffe. That was actually an adolescent. There's a smaller one coming up. Okay, wildebeest again. I think they're considered as one of the ugly five, but I think that's a bit mean, really. Lapwing. You can see the area, a much larger area here. So baboons everywhere. There were baboons on the lawn, baboons on the side of the road, baboons just, well, waterbuck, male waterbuck. That's a warthog coming down as the sun was setting. And then the Makolo River. Okay, and with this particular game reserve, we'd stopped somewhere for a sundowner. Very civilised. But there were four actually. The photo only shows three, but you have the really tiny one, the adolescent, and the adult, and the other adult was ahead actually. And I said, I'm sorry, I really do like these animals very much. And that's the totally different pattern on the again Buchal's zebra. Those were Egyptian geese, and we actually saw hippos, baby hippo and mom, going down into the river. We did a short 1 hour trip along the Makolo River to see what we could see. A lot of crocodiles, basically. That's another very old elephant that Jo was tracking, and she was determined that we'd see it because it was our last game drive. And she found it for us, and again, absolutely huge. But again, you can't have many elephant on a small reserve. And then our final sundowner. Yeah. And that's where we were staying in this one. So this is the Royal Morabisi Lodges. We were in Wild Dog. And baboons on the lawn. Amarula. Has anyone ever had amarula liqueur with their coffee? It's very nice. And Jo, she was amazing. She was a real expert, particularly on the birds. And James is just in the middle there. He was with us for the whole of this part of the holiday. And from here, he actually took us back to Johannesburg so we could fly down for another equal length of time on the Western Cape, which obviously I'm not doing. And so, thank you very much. John was the only person to see all 5 elephants. You can see the difference with the Kruger National Park. You've got tarmac roads, and the traffic stops, obviously, for elephants have right of way. Elephant crossing. We saw a lot of rhino, lots of lions, lots of Cape buffalo, but I didn't see a leopard apart from the one that was in the enclosure. And so that was the first half of a very exciting holiday. And thank you very much for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed some of the photos.
Yeah, very good.